you need to accept that no one's coming to save you and no one's going to offer you a job just because you've done really well at your job. You are your own savior. I was basically negotiating with old school German buyers. They really made it a difficult time for me. Whatever the goal is for that day or whatever the goal is for that week, I asked myself, did X action bring me closer to achieving that goal? And if the answer is no, then I'd be wasting my time.
Welcome to the ISP NextGen Podcast, where we speak to salespeople about their journeys to help you demystify the profession. Today, we are joined by Zach Hassanali, BDL Manager at DeepL. Zach, thank you very much for joining me. Did you want to take a minute to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit more?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, great pronunciation of my last name, Jordan. Appreciate that. Especially a tongue twister. I think rightly so. I'm a BDR manager at DeepL. I've been at DeepL for about a year and a half now. Before that, I was at Salesforce, did sort of the classical BDR into AE kind of route, and then pivoted towards DeepL, which is really, really good fun. And before that, I was selling vacuum cleaners and hair dryers at Dyson. So I was working across marketing and sales there, which was very different to selling sort of CRM and AI translation services, but also a lot of fun. Been moving around a fair bit over the last few years. So I'm currently sat in Amsterdam, relocated back here in October, and happy to be back on continental Europe.
What was it that sort of piqued your interest in a career in sales? You mentioned that the experience of sort of B2C sales at Dyson.
Yeah.
You now moved into more complex B2B sales.
Yeah.
What was that sort of initial sort of spark?
Yeah. So my first experience of sales actually was a recruitment agency. And I think recruitment agencies typically have a bit of a bad rap, and they sometimes have a bit of a bad reputation. And I'd love to say that, you know, this one was any better than perhaps some of the bad reputations out there, but it was a bit of a classical experience, right? It was very boiler room-esque, despite wanting to brand themselves as this kind of like ethical agency. That was my first experience of sales, right? And it was this kind of like very high pressure, results driven sort of culture. It was very transactional. It wasn't as ethical as perhaps I liked it. But I got a buzz off it, to be honest with you. Like I got a buzz off the input and then the direct output and the chase behind closing sort of net new business. That was something that really interests me. And then I moved to Dyson, and there I was in a marketing role, and I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest with you. So I was very anxious about, am I going to get found out? Do I really know what I'm doing? And then I remember sort of I was sat next to their key account team. So I was sat on my own at a desk, and the key account team that was responsible for all of Dyson's sort of third-party retail relationships. So they basically would be selling. I would just sort of listen to their calls a little bit. They were like the ones that were getting our products to market, right? They accounted for sort of 70% of our revenue as such. But I was like, how are these guys making all this money and not really doing very much, right? I don't know. I was intrigued to know like how they operated, like why like 70% of our revenue went through that team.
Yeah.
And I'd hear their calls with customers, and sometimes it'd be heated. You'd hear some of the negotiations. I remember there was a bit of movement in the team, and I really was like, okay, I want to. Sorry, we have to swear on this. I wasn't sure if this was a. I was like, okay, like there's a new manager. I'm going to go over and just speak to him and introduce myself. And I stayed late one evening, and this guy was like getting burned out. Like the team had changed. It was like one manager and like 2 key account managers. And before that, there was like 7 key account managers. He looked like a stressed out guy. I was like, this is my chance. This is my chance to go and like position myself. So I went over and just spoke to him and said, look, I want to move into a key account role. I somehow managed to just network my way into the team. And it was my job to basically rebuild the relationship with this retailer. And it was awful. I absolutely hated it. Actually, it was really, really rubbish. And it was all in German. I'd never done anything like this before. I did the classic thing of talking myself into a position of pretty high impact. And I was basically negotiating with old school German buyers that were, 55, 60. They'd been around the block, and these people handle relationships with, hundreds of different vendors. I was basically sat there with like four very sort of like hardline German negotiators trying to negotiate money back. And yeah, they really made it a difficult time for me. I found it very challenging, but it was incredibly rewarding because at the end of it, like we went through this big struggle for 9 months where we were trying to negotiate this money back. We got it back. And then it was like, okay, let's build out a plan together to actually get Dyson back in your stores and back on your retail channels. And that was a really rewarding experience because then the money started to flow into the business. And like I saw the power of having these relationships, particularly in the B2B domain. And that was sort of for me where I was like, oh, okay, like it's a really tough job, but it's also incredibly rewarding in terms of how rewarding those relationships can be and how great it can be when you are getting on with, your stakeholders and your customers.
I love that idea of it just surrounding the importance of having those tough conversations, because before going into them, you're dreading it. But when you come out the other end, as you said, you've learned so much, you've realigned relationship and laid the foundation for a more sustainable relationship
100%.
Out the other side. So I love that. Now, you've spoken a little bit about career progression.
Yeah.
Again, comes with a lot of unknown. Sometimes that feeling of imposter syndrome, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
How do you take ownership of your own growth to ensure that you are constantly progressing and constantly preparing for that next role?
There's this expectation that like things are just going to be given to you, right? And there's this expectation that things are just going to fall into place, and like you're going to have this dream job, you're going to do 9 months in this role, and you're going to get like an AE role, or you're going to move into solution consulting, and it's just going to happen, right? But I think you need to accept that no one's coming to save you, and no one's going to offer you a job just because you've done really well at your job. You need to accept the fact that actually you are your own savior. You are responsible for your next step or wherever it is you want to go. And you're responsible for putting in that infrastructure to make it happen, basically. So I think it's like a chicken and the egg thing. It's like, in order to have ownership, you need to accept that ownership is necessary to get you to where you need to be. I kind of like realized that a little bit like back to Dyson days where it was this chaotic sort of mess, although Dyson looks very kind of shiny. The point I'm trying to make it is like in the environment that was Dyson for me, there was no set way of doing things. There was no career path. I've got friends that work in the civil service, for example, and it's like very structured and layered in terms of how progression works. So I think, first of all, accept that there's no path for you. You need to go and walk your own path, and you need to make your own path. You need to cut through the weeds and figure it all out. So I think accepting that no one's going to save you is the first point. And then once you've accepted that, all of a sudden, the world's your oyster. It was like, oh, I want to go where there's the most money and the most sort of impact in the business, which was sales. I then took that ownership and I was like, right, I've got to go make that happen somehow. And then you go off and you have your conversations and you have those dialogues, try and get the buy-in, take a few no's, go down a path. There's a no door to run through, and then you try a different door and that one opens. But I think like that for me that's how I approached it sort of off the bat, was like, I am the master of my own sort of career and fate, I guess. And with that, there's plenty of opportunity thereafter.
Yeah, I love that. So two sort of quotes, if you will, or two things popped into my mind as you were speaking there. First was, any business, no matter how big, is only barely functioning. We expect it to be perfect, really clearly defined, but for the most part, just about functioning. And then the second one is this idea of one-way door and two-way door decisions, right? The majority of things within our career, within life, are two-way doors. And what I mean by that is you can walk through it, but then you can change your mind and walk back out again. So really walk confidently through those two-way door decisions. If you think it's going to give you fulfillment, if you think it's going to give you joy, then go for it. So I absolutely love that.
And then I think just adding to that is, a lot of the time we take opportunity and we seize opportunity thinking that like, that's all we have to then do. Right. But like in reality, you can go and do a job, absolutely hate it, and then go pivot to something else. So, you're not bound. It's not like when our grandparents were younger and it's like you do the same job for like 30 years and you get your pension and then you clock out. It's like, no, go do something, figure out if you like it or you hate it. If you like it, fantastic, drill down on it. If you hate it, leverage it, like pick up the skills and then go do something else. And I think a lot of people, it's normal, right? Because we view other people's opinions of ourselves as extremely important, as we should do to an extent. But, we don't want to disappoint people. But in reality, when you're working at a company, removing all the branding, all the niceties, all the benefits, at the end of the day, you are a number on a balance sheet, and you need to maximize that knowledge and go into a role and always know that you can walk away and you can go do something else. And I think having that power means that you can then all of a sudden take a lot more risk, and you can go and expose yourselves to a lot of other things that perhaps you wouldn't have done before. So yeah, I think like the power to walk away is very important as well, as it is to like put yourself in a position to go and do the thing.
Yeah. And I think that sort of alleviates some of that discomfort, I guess, when stepping into a new role, because it can feel very final. Like, okay, now I owe them, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years of my life.
Yeah.
But in reality, that's not the case. Now, in terms of your progression, and by the sounds of things, you take quite a lot of passion out of helping your teams to progress through roles. What advice do you have for those people that are trying to get that next role?
Yeah, good question. So first point is, like, I make it clear no one's coming to save you. Like, although I'm your manager, I'll do everything I can to try and to get you to where you need to be, but it's on you to drive it, I think is the first point. Which I think a lot of people say in these kind of conversations. You're responsible for that growth and driving it forward. With that said, I think it's really weird. I was speaking to a friend about this the other day, who he's been in a role now for like a year and a half, and he's working in a completely different industry to me. But we're talking about it, and he was like, I've told my manager that, in 2 months' time, I don't want to be in this role, and I want to be doing something. I want to be moving on to bigger and better things. Yeah. And I was like, that's great, mate. Like, fantastic. But like, what are those bigger and better things? He was like, well, like I'm thinking like maybe like account management, or moving more into business development. He works in logistics, so he's very much on like the supply chain side of things.
Yeah.
But he wants to move more into sales. And I'm like, okay, but like going into a one-to-one with your boss and just saying like, I don't want to be doing this job in 2 months, and I want to be doing bigger and better things, it's fucking useless. Like, we want to be doing bigger and better things. It's like put your stake in the ground and say, look, in 2 months' time, I want to be in a position where like I'm in a business development associate role, or whatever the thing is, right? And like, first of all, like, say what you want, I think is the main thing. So first of all, accept full responsibility and ownership. No one's coming to save you. Second of all, like, stay what you actually want to go and achieve, and stay where you want to go. I think like that's a big thing. And that's a scary thing as well, right? Because the moment you say the thing that you want to do, all of a sudden you're exposed to actually failing and not achieving the thing that you want to do. Plus, the compounded effect of you've just said it to someone that you really value, which is your boss. And like, you're like, okay, well, now there's even more pressure to actually like get there, right? But that's good. Let the pressure drive you. Like, if they're a good boss, a good manager, I say boss, manager, team lead, whatever, like they'll be with you on that journey, right? So I said to him, I was like, look, man, like, say what you want, and then from that you can back plan. Like, you have like a time frame, and you can back plan like the steps required to get there. And those are like the admin steps, right? Those are like like, get this bit of experience here, like get exposure to this thing here, like whatever it is. But then I think the real thing is like leveraging the relationships, and not just putting a stake in the ground with your manager, but like going to like the future hiring manager, putting time in with them, asking them like, what is it you look for in a successful candidate? Like, what can I be doing now in my current role to expose myself to the things that will be useful in a role in your team?
Yeah.
And then you like, it's like prospecting. Like, that's like the decision maker as such. But then before you go have that conversation, have a few conversations with people in their team. Like, people love talking about themselves. I'm doing it right now. Like, I'm sat here just stroking my ego, telling you all these great things about how like all these things Zach knows. Like, we love it. That's what we do as humans, right? So like, do the same in a business. Go speak to the CSM team, put time in with, a few customer success managers if you're an SDR wanting to move into customer success, and, get them to talk about themselves and just leverage it, make notes, write everything down, and then go to the decision maker and play it back to them. Go to their line manager and play it back to them and sell it to them. So I think I've rambled a lot. I've had a lot of filter coffee, Jordan, but I think it's in short, it's like lay your stake in the ground. Like after you've taken ownership, go away, do your homework, speak to people in the team that you want to move into, go speak to their manager. So that's the decision maker, and make sure that you're fully transparent throughout that whole process, right? Like I see a lot of the time, over communicate on absolutely everything. I think in general, we should, I'm always over communicating anyway, but I think it's really important, particularly once you've asked for your your manager's buy-in, that you're very transparent on where you're at with that process and the conversations you're having in the background. Because the last thing you want is for any information to get back to your manager through someone else, which could potentially jeopardize them, because your manager's got a job to do, right? They have things they need to deliver on. You're delivering for your team currently. So their buy-in's really important, and that's not just given off the bat. That buy-in needs to be maintained throughout you transitioning out of the team. And it's really important that you're then communicating on where you're at with the future role, where you're interviewing, what the next steps are, just so they can plan that resource as well, and also feel that they're part of the process and part of your success, because we love it. They also get the gratification of you moving on and feeling like we're helping you to an extent.
Yeah. It's such a great, so many great points. In fact, the piece about over communication, it's such an understated skill or thing, right? And then it supports that two-way door idea, right? You don't want to burn a bridge, because you might get in C and it doesn't work. So 100%, you want to leave that door open. And then the other thing, particularly within sales roles, if you're looking for a sales role, we are uniquely positioned to find jobs, because we can apply the skills that we're going to be applying on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
Throughout that process. Part of why sales is so great is because it's the opposite of monotonous. Right? No 2 days are the same. It's a multifaceted role. But as part of that, you've also got to be really on top of your organization in terms of time management, particularly.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you're maximizing the return on your time that you invest daily?
Yeah. So this is a pretty simple answer. And it came from one of the sort of mentor, coach, I don't really know how I want to call him, a friend, I guess, when I was working at Salesforce. And one of the things he said to me really stuck with me. At the end of each day, if you ask yourself, did I do something to progress my pipeline or get one step closer to closing a deal? If the answer is yes, then you've used your time productively. And if the answer is no, then you've just wasted a day.
Yeah.
Right? I think particularly when you're working in a field where you're in complete control of your time, we're not sat there just answering phone calls that are coming in all day, and we're delivering an SLA. We're choosing how we're investing our time, and we're investing our time to get the maximum return on time invested, as you said, right? But that really stuck with me, because it's a bit of a ruthless way of viewing your time, and you have to be very honest with yourself. So the way I do it is I just ask myself that question, which is whatever the goal is for that day, or whatever the goal is for that week, or whatever the goal is for that month, I ask myself, did X action bring me closer to achieving that goal? And if the answer is no, then I just wasted my time doing that action, right? And I think that's very applicable, and it's a very binary way of viewing things. It's a bit sort of psychopathic or whatever, because it is very black and white. But I think it holds true, especially in a role where you're an SDR and it's transitioning less away from just banging the phones and doing loads of output and activity. Yes, that's part of it, but now we've got loads of other tools which help us, maximize where we invest our time.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's did you get one day, did your actions today bring you one step closer to booking that meeting, or speaking to that prospect, or breaking into that account? Yeah. And I think we can delude ourselves a lot. We like to, especially when you're a salaried employee and you're not an entrepreneur, and you're, there's no one saving you all the time, making you feel like you've got the cushion to rely on of your monthly salary. It's very easy to delude ourselves. Sometimes we'll sit there and we'll just sit on LinkedIn scrolling. We might like a few posts to pretend that we're building our presence, whatever it may be. I don't know. Procrastination as such.
Yeah.
But it's important that it's we're not deluding ourselves, and we're being transparent about it. And it's okay to have a day where it's like, did I move one step closer to booking that meeting with Mr. CIO over here? The answer is no, I didn't really do anything. It's okay. Like, it happens. But when those days start to add up and those days start to compound over a week, a month, a quarter, 2 quarters,
Yeah.
then you need to probably reassess perhaps how you're spending your time and why. And maybe it's because you're not passionate about the thing. Maybe it's because, you've got trouble focusing. Maybe you're an office person who like loves to go to the coffee machine and have a chat, and then you sit back down and someone else speaks to you. And that's all fine, right? We're humans. But then you need to put a framework in place. And you need to like understand why you do certain things, which requires introspection, and then create a framework.
Yeah.
Like, back to your question about how do I do it? I'm someone who loves a natter. I'm like, that annoying English person in the international office. He's always talking about the weather, always wants to go grab a coffee, always wants to have that small talk, which is hilarious, in sort of the Germanic culture. I'd always be walking around saying, "Oh, are you all right?" And people would be like, "Why is this man asking if I'm all right?" Like, it's a very strange thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So I know that I'm someone who loves to chat. So like, when I'm in the office, I have to take myself away. Like, I have to go and, like, if I'm in Cologne with the team, like, I'll just go away and sort of sit in a room on my own, because like I know that I'll engage and I'll have those small talks, and I plan that into my day as well. So like, I'll make sure that I spend 20 minutes sat with everyone, because it's time that I can afford to not be as focused perhaps and have those distractions.
Yeah.
So I think like ruthlessly asking yourself a question at the end of the day is very useful for me, because then it helps me also understand like where I'm wasting my time.
Yeah.
I think understanding how your brain works and what sort of person you are and what your thresholds are for distractions or getting stuff done, basically. And then I think like the third point is the framework. So for me, it's like, I use blockers in my calendar a lot, and I'm very ruthless with those blockers. So like, when it's in there, the rule I have with myself is if it's in there, it gets done. So I use my calendar the same way that, like, you have a meeting and you're making a coffee and there's 1 minute on the clock because it's like, oh shit, it starts at 10:45. You'll quickly run there and you'll like be like there, and you'll be, I used to be a smoker and be like, I've got time for a cigarette 2 minutes before this thing. I'll be there smoking really quickly. Don't smoke anymore. And then I would rush in. But it's because like that person, like, you care about what that person thinks about you. You don't want to be perceived to be disorganized or late or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I think that what I'm trying to say there is like, hold yourself to the same level of accountability that you would if someone else was judging you. And that self is just like Zach tomorrow or Zach next week when he has to go and present his numbers to his boss. Like, hold yourself accountable to the future version of yourself as such.
That self-awareness piece and review, honest, transparent, frank review with yourself then helps to drive that accountability. And then prior, that preparation, right? As you said, organizing the calendar.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what you need to do throughout the day.
Yeah.
Try and limit the potential for procrastination and distraction. Now, on that preparation piece, the last topic I want to talk to you about is meeting preparation and research tips.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of what we do, or a lot of the value that we can bring, is built during that research. How much research, how much quality research can we do to build out the hypotheses, to build out and lay the foundations for a great call, a great interaction, a great relationship?
Yeah.
So in terms of preparing for meetings, have you got any techniques that you've used, that you encourage within the team to ensure that you're setting up an effective meeting and an efficient meeting, but without overthinking? Because we can get caught in that sort of paralysis of research.
So it's a really good question. I don't have like a 3-step plan as to like what you should do. I think every person's different, and every person retains information differently, and every person's able to like leverage information in a different way.
Yeah.
But I think I'd refer to a little bit to what I said about the time management piece. And I think a lot of these points rely on a fairly heavy level of introspection, but I think just being really honest with yourself of like, we've all been on a call, we've all had like a meeting with a prospect where we've sat there for an hour or an hour and a half, like researching to the nth degree, like figuring out where their children went to school and like, what favorite holiday they've been on with their wife back in 2013, and when they're like, maybe the move like that would be useful. Like, obviously, I'm joking a bit there, but I think the point I'm making is we've all gone to that nth degree. We've all gone to like the far-reaching realms of what niche, personalized bit of information could be relevant in that meeting.
Yeah,
and I think you need to ask yourself, like, am I going into this because I'm really nervous and I'm kind of like delaying the actual act of the meeting itself or the call itself? I think, like, referring to the example of making a cold call or a call, like, am I just delaying like the fear of rejections, which I think is a lot of the time the case, or is this genuinely going to add value in that call?
Yeah.
And then I think, like, the way that you can typically check that is if you are like doing a lot of research and you ask yourself, like, am I doing this because I'm just really uncomfortable? Then just stop doing the research, because at that point you've probably done enough, right? You've got to a point where you're like, am I actually like doing this because I'm deluding myself? Then just stop, because like you've been sat there for too long anyway, and like you've probably got way more information than you need.
Yeah, definitely.
So like that for me is like a big marker as such. But you can also like set frameworks in place to avoid that, right? Like you could have a timer on your desk or on your phone. You just set like a 5-minute stopwatch, and it's like, I'm going to go and all I'm going to do for 5 minutes is be hyper focused and just go through their LinkedIn, the annual reports. I'll use ChatGPT perhaps. I think like there's a lot to be said for just working smart and just using ChatGPT and other sort of AI tools which do a bit of web scraping to really sort of flesh out the important bits of information, whether that be also leveraging your internal CRM, like going through Salesforce, figuring out a few conversations that have already been had in the account, summarizing a few points, and then acting. And I think as well is be very ruthless with the information you need. So like realistically, you don't need like 15 different points. Like just have 2 or 3 things. And usually that comes down to like social credibility. So like, who have you spoken to where and what about? Like that's also really relevant. And then like just the basics of understanding like what's relevant to them based on the research you've done on their organization. Then the rest just comes. It's just fine, because like you're offering value, and that's fine. Yeah. Like as long as you're offering value, that person will probably speak to you. If they don't, that's fine. There's probably something external that you can't control to that, and then you just try again another time.
Yeah, I love that. As you mentioned, it's all about finding, okay, what's that trigger? What's that like one piece of relevance?
Yeah.
And then, is there some sort of like question funneling technique that will allow me to go deeper in that conversation? That one trigger, get them talking, and then keep them talking.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
As you said, we're not going to use 95% of that in-depth research. Otherwise, we'll just be talking at someone. And Zach, it's been really insightful conversation there. I will let you go and enjoy your holiday, because for our listeners, Zach is on holiday at the minute and is kindly joined us anyway. Thank you again. And to our listeners, until next time. And next week on the ISP NextGen Podcast.
There is so much noise through the inbox. People are starting to answer their phone or go for a walk. 15 minutes away from your laptop is really important.